Hello everyone, this is part 15 of What If Naruto Got Lost During His Training TS, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Previously on Lost, Tsukiko was still awake when Naruto's army came marching out of the portal. Yoshiko had already gone back to sleep. She saw shinobi clones come out, this time with the kanji for the number 3 on their masks. Following them were ankelo-drawn wagons, riding on the wagons, along with the supplies, with the medic clones whose sleeves also sported the number 3. Following them were the chef clones, then the smith clones, and so on and so forth. The last ones to leave the portal were 500 ankelos and their riders, 2 riders per ankelo. After the last one was out, the temporary gate snuffed out of existence. Tsukiko got bored after watching the clones set up camp and eventually drifted off to sleep. Some of the clones went into the tunnels to search for more chambers, ones that they could use as sleeves for the 500 ankelos. Once Naruto noticed that Tsukiko had gone to Dreamland, he had a few of his clones move her and her daughter to one of the tents that had been set up in one of the other chambers. These tents had beds in them already set up. Naruto then had his clones turn the whole abandoned mine into one big base. Outside of the mine was a mining town that had been abandoned when no more iron ore could be found. Naruto wouldn't use the town just yet, he'd have to first fortify the mine, make sure that there would be no possibility of infiltration or of any collapses. He could afford to lose clones, but in the future there would be real people working in the mine, and he couldn't have any of the mess on him. The mine's situated beneath a small mountain. At the peak of the mountain, Naruto had some clones set up his communication office. It would be from here that all communication with other camps and bases would occur, also all information would be received and passed out from there. Outside all of the mine entrances and exits, Naruto had his clones set up some lookout towers, and sandbag them. He had them create a number of defensive barriers that would serve as the first line of defense should this base be found by the country's daimyo's army. Ballistas and catapults were set up on the slope of the mountain as well as outside the entrances of the mine. Beyond the actual barrier, Naruto had his clones set up a minefield of sorts, not using actual mines, but using some pressure-sensitive explosive tags. Those little pieces of paper would be harder to detect. Of course, the clones made a map of where each and every one of the tags were located so that no one would accidentally set them off. Lights were installed inside the mine. The lights were not run by electricity or chakra. The lights were mostly those blue glowing crystals that Naruto's clones had found in the crystal cave. There wasn't a place in the entire mine that did not have light. Naruto made sure that the whole of the mine was explored. He had this accomplished the fastest way possible by spamming regular cage bushin. By doing this, it only took him 3 hours to map the whole mine. Naruto had his clones set up teleportation gates in every room. This base or camp being the biggest of the 3 that he had founded so far, it needed all these modes of getting places fast. From some of the people that he had freed in the other 2 countries, Naruto was given information about the uniforms of the armies of the other nations. This information would be used in Naruto's upcoming rescue operation and invasion plan. He would have his clones look like soldiers from the other nations, except Naya and Nasu. His ankelos would be equipped with more armor than their boss already had. They would also be equipped with mini ballistas on their backs. One of the riders would operate it, while the other would control the ankelo. Its club tail would get some additional pikes for added harming power. When Naruto started his invasion, he would first send out his ankelo's army. Behind them would be the shinobi clone army. The last group of fighters that would march on the battlefield would be Naruto's mage clones. The mage clones were made out of chakra, but they had a pool of magic for them to use. These clones were limited to magical attacks and physical attacks only. These were the literal mages of the army. Naruto would have their attacks limited to curses and hexes that would slow down and slightly weaken the forces of the gluttonous daimyo. They wouldn't be allowed to use some of the more destructive spells in their arsenal. During this little attack, Naruto's army's objective would be to rescue the prisoners worth rescuing, meaning that the clones would bring the battle to the castle. They weren't a distraction, they were to actually invade. Naruto wouldn't be going with his army, he would be waiting in the mine. His face was known inside the castle as well as inside the pit. He couldn't afford to be seen. His presence wasn't to be known as of yet. After a week's worth of preparations, Naruto's army were off. The armies were split into 6 groups, each would be attacking from a different direction. This would force the Tetsu army to divide itself among invading forces. Naruto's clones and ankylos were more than enough to get in. It's the getting out that would be a problem. But Naruto had something planned in case that would happen. Under his base were several tunnels that led to Tetsu's capital, none of them reaching the castle on the hill, but they reached inside or rather under the city. The ends of these tunnels that were under the city would be opened up to allow escapees to get in. Waiting in these tunnels would be wagons, but instead of being pulled by ankylos or any other animals, the clones would be the ones pulling. The escapees would ride these wagons all the way to the base. Once the wagons were several meters away from the openings, the clones that remained there would collapse the tunnels. To the escapees it would look like the clones SD their lives for the escapees to escape. Once safely in the base, the people would be passed over into the care of the medic clones. After they were treated, they would be given the choice of going to Naruto's fortress of staying and helping out. The attack was underway. The sentries of the city received no warning when they were suddenly attacked. The ankylos stopped moving forward when they had reached a certain distance from the city, then they began firing their ballistas. They would serve as the long-range cover for the shinobi clones that were darting forward ready to engage the city guard. The city got a kick out of the aggressiveness shown by the clones that looked like soldiers from the other countries. Some of the clones were able to bypass the guards and went all pyromaniac on the buildings in the city. Unlike Naruto's fortress, there was no wall that protected the city from invasion. The only walls that were there were the ones that protected the castle. After this little battle, a wall would be constructed. To the defenders it looked like the other countries had grown tired of them and formed an alliance against them. The clones that did not join in on the Pyro Fest raced to the castle walls. Once there they set exploding tags on the walls, went to a safe distance, then watched the fireworks. The tags were strong enough to bring down a mine shaft, but were only strong enough to dent the walls. The sound of the explosion alerted the soldiers that were nearby, which then went to defend the walls. The clones had to divide themselves, a third would blow a hole into the walls, while the rest would keep the defenders at bay. It took the attackers 3 hours of continuous blasting to blow a good-sized hole in the wall. There was only one hole in the wall that was made in that time. It was good enough for the clones. The ones detaining the defenders continued what they were doing, while the demolition group made their way inside. They raced toward the pit as fast as they could. Any resistance that they met were dealt with swiftly. They were even able to knock out the daimyo that they were not supposed to get rid of as of yet. They also didn't have the time to do such things. The clones were running on a tight schedule. Once they got inside the castle, they had to get the people they were after as fast as they possibly could, without using jutsus or magic or anything else out of the ordinary, then get out with their targets. Inside the city, the pyromaniacs had to deal with the sudden arrival of the defending soldiers, as well as the people living in the city, some of whom helped the clones attack the soldier. These were the people that were made to eat a relative as punishment for displeasing the daimyo or any military official for that matter. The clones that encountered these people decided then and there that they too would be brought back to base. So after dealing with the nuisances that were the soldiers, the clones brought these people and their families to the tunnels. Outside the city, the defenders had managed to make their way to the ankylos, but they were having an extremely hard time dealing with them. Those things packed a lot of power with every swing of their tails. The spikes didn't help their victims either. None of the ankylos were injured so far, but some of the riders had already SD. Once a clone SD it burst into flames. It made the defenders think that it was some sort of precaution against being used as food for the Tetsu army. The soldiers just couldn't figure out how it happened. Seeing that happen, the defenders increased the ferocity of their attacks. They began to push back the ankylos. The ankylos were being forced to retreat since their riders didn't want any of them to wander off. Due to the ankylos pulling back, the mages had to resort to buffing the ankylos, making them faster. Naruto could not afford any of his ankylos to be captured. The clones had finally made their way into the pit. Some of the POWs thought that their prayers had been answered and that the daimyos had finally sent over someone to rescue them. But they soon learned that it wasn't meant to be, since some of the POWs decided that it would be impossible for them to escape the city, and more so the country. So they thought that they could curry favor with their captors and maybe be granted a bit of freedom, like be allowed into their army instead of in the pit. They did this by attacking the clones. This made the clones' jobs harder. The attacking people were hindering their movements. Some of the clones were taken out of commission. Even with all the help that the Chisiobushans were providing, it was almost no use. They got it, but getting out seemed to be almost impossible. Some of the clones started to hear approaching footsteps from outside the pit. The soldiers had found out where they all were. The clones decided to use their smoke bombs to create a distraction as well as decrease visibility. Then they would use the shadows to find their targets. The extraction operation was getting harder and harder. Time was running out for them. It almost came to the point where they would have to use a jutsu or two to complete their mission. But they didn't need to resort to jutsus. What they thought were approaching soldiers were actually their comrades come to help them out. They had somehow trapped the defenders somewhere. With these reinforcements, getting the people that they were sent to get out became easier. They still had to fight off the attacking POWs. With the thought of possible escape, some of the non-targets followed the clones out. Originally it was only supposed to be the targets that would get out along with the clones, but plans change. There were more people that were brought out. These people helped the clones, so the clones couldn't just leave them. Once all the clones and escapees were speeding off to the base, the clones waved goodbye before they collapsed the tunnels in full view of the escapees. They were unable to stick with the plan due to the incoming defenders. As soon as the signal was sent to all the clones that the escapees had been taken to the tunnels, the ones still fighting in the city committed taking 1 or 2 soldiers with them. The majors were forced to use a mass teleportation spell to get themselves and the ankylos back to base. The spell was disguised by an earthquake that they caused, which formed a crack in the earth that looked like they fell in it. All in all, the clones lost half of their number in the attack. But their mission was still a success since all their targets were brought to the base, along with a few bonuses. Naruto didn't really mind the bonuses since it was a possibility that his clones would bring more people than originally planned. Since these people had been forced into practicing cannibalism, Naruto decided to treat them to real food that he himself prepared, with chef clones as just helpers. He felt bad that he didn't go with his clones into battle, but it was necessary that no one find out that he was the cause of the attack, yet. The people were surprised at the way that they were being treated. When they were given the choice on what they wanted to do, all the healthy people decided to stay around, while the younger ones, specifically children and the weaker people, were sent to the fortress that Naruto had yet to name. After deciding to stay, Naruto assigned them to different divisions in the base. Some of the men were assigned to the soldier division, some of them were sent to work with the ankylos, and the others to other divisions. The bulk of the volunteers went to the ankylos, since the clones that manned the ballistas were decimated in the attack. Like in the other 2 countries, Naruto would have his forces in Tetsu concentrate on freeing prisoners and slaves for the time being. They wouldn't be actively and directly taking on the resident army. Naruto spent some time getting to know the people that he had rescued. He also got to know Tsukiko a little bit more, as well as Yoshiko. He learned that the pair were originally from Sakura no Kuni and were visiting some distant relatives of her late husband in Tetsu when they were abducted. Being Naruto's friend, Tsukiko was trusted above all the other escapees. This made Naruto choose her to be in charge of the base once he left. Of course, he had to show her the ropes first, as well as leave some advisors for her. The advisors were ultimate scholar clones. They focused on knowledge. They could fight, but not as well as the shinobi clones. It was a week later that the base received its first visitor from one of the other 2 bases. Tamatsu came to visit. Rather, Ryu needed some information to be personally given to Naruto. Since he couldn't leave, he sent Tamatsu in his place. The man was no longer in the uniform of a guard, but actually looked like an officer. He wore a sash that had the kanji for 2 embroidered into it with silver thread. Instead of a bodysuit, he wore a dark purple shirt and black pants with many pockets. Instead of armor, he wore a mithril undershirt, and a vest over his shirt. Fastened on his waist was katana. Ryu and Gekkai had decided on implementing this new part of the uniform so that the officers were easily spotted by their subordinates. The information that he brought Naruto was that Naya and Nasu couldn't get their hands on any more prisoners or slaves. Either the 2 countries had already run out, or they were being kept secret locations that most likely only the highest tier of officers and officials knew about. Ryu's position wasn't high enough to get this information. The new uniform for the off-fires was originally proposed by Ryu, which Gekkai approved, then the two sent a message to Yahiko to inform him of it. The three men kind of standardized it. Naruto already knew this information, but he wouldn't reveal the existence of his ultimate clones to even his friends. The mystery of where Naruto got his clone officers and clone officials would remain his secret. He wouldn't teach his Bushin versions to anyone, well at least he didn't plan on doing it. With the information, Tamatsu brought some designs with him, as well as some ready-made ones for any offices that Naruto had in his Tetsu base. After the sharing of information, Tamatsu was introduced to Tsukiko and some of her chosen subordinates, most of whom were former officers, none of them were clones. He was also introduced to the advisors. When asked why Nasu's base didn't have any, Naruto said that Gekkai didn't need any. Tamatsu realized that it was true, the man did not really even ask for advice. Tamatsu stayed in Tetsu for a week to help Tsukiko and her officers get used to their duties and such. Due to past experiences, as well as forced lessons from Gekkai, he was able to create a basic system for the base operate. He shared stories about what the officers in Nasu did in different situations. He even explained how to use the base's main teleportation gate, something that Naruto had actually forgotten to do. A week after Tamatsu left the base, this time under Tsukiko's command, began its second military operation. Some of Naruto's spies all over the country had sent in information about the confirmed location of a warehouse that held some recent slave acquisitions. With this information, Tsukiko assembled the Soldier S, and with a little bit of help from Naruto, came up with a plan to rescue these people. The location was a week away, so the army brought some temporary teleportation gates with them. This would be the first test for Tsukiko and her officers. Naruto left Tsukiko and her subordinates to it. The whole operation was under their command. But that didn't mean that Naruto didn't participate in it, well they didn't know that he was keeping an eye or two on the marching army. Due to the first assault, security around the towns, villages, and cities in the country were upped in preparation for future attacks, like the one that was on its way. 3/4 of the army was made up of clones while the remaining fourth were people. Naruto watched over this army by merely becoming one with the wind. He didn't become the wind, cause if he did, Tsukiko and the ones that stayed in the base wouldn't be able to find him. The operation was a complete success, there was no loss of life on Naruto's side, just a few minor injuries. The army had managed to rescue an additional 300 people, some of whom were about to mince meat for Tetsu. After getting back to the base, some of the people would claim that there were times when they thought that they would but some force had pushed back the Tetsu troops. A sudden gust of wind would send things flying at the Tetsu troops, thus allowing Naruto's forces to escape death. Of course Naruto had to help his people. These near-death encounters made the people realize how dangerous their choice was, but none of them decided to go to the still unnamed fortress city. Of the 300 people that had been rescued, only 100 had opted to leave. Naruto's forces in Tetsu had grown by 200 individuals. Some of the clones went to the fortress city with the 100 people that opted not to stay. There were now fewer clones in the base compared to living people. A week after the successful mission, Yahiko came for a visit. There wasn't much to do in Naya, there were very few slaves left in captivity. The daimyo had decided that due to the attacks and breakouts that he would focus on his army than on acquiring more slaves for the time being. He had half of his forces focus on locating the escapees, while the other half were focused on attacking the other countries. They were to pillage and plunder as much as they could in each and every battle. Security in the cities and towns had increased exponentially. It seemed that Naya had gained more manpower due to the daimyo waging war with the slave traders, taking out the heads with some assassins that he had found. He then drafted the slave traders' people into his army. According to Yahiko, Nasu was also doing the same thing. Naya and Nasu had formed a very shaky alliance due to the attacks and breakouts that Yahiko had orchestrated. The two daimyos had seen the pattern, they noticed the organized threat. There was a possibility that the cause of the attacks and breakouts really were the other countries, but they had noticed the recent events in Tetsu. Yahiko came to warn the Tetsu base of the possibility that Naya and Nasu would somehow form another shaky alliance with Tetsu to battle the plague that Naruto's forces were. After sharing the information with Naruto, he decided to help Tsukiko out some more, by giving her some ideas as to what to do in her future attacks. Security had been drastically increased around the country and more thought-out plans would be needed to accomplish any future missions. Naruto let them do as they pleased. It seemed that things were going according to plan. Of what he had seen in Naya, he believed that all the other countries had similar social problems. Naruto saw that there was much injustice in among the 9 countries. It seemed like these 9 countries were the most war-torn countries in all of Elemental at the time. After his first successful rescue mission in Naya, Naruto planned on getting the 9 countries to somehow work together to fight him. Once they banded together against Naruto, he would then crush them all at the same time, ridding their countries of their control. He would recreate the 9 into something close to the utopian ideal. Naya and Nasu had already signed the death warrants by joining forces, soon Tetsu, then the next country, then the next. He had received the latest report from Token, Hyakume, and Dorotobo, which gave him details about the love of slaves of the nobility of the other countries, their love of torturing POWs as a form of entertainment, the greed for wealth and pleasure, as well as their ability and continued efficiency in making a majority of their people unhappy. The war between the 9 lands had been going on for more than 900 years, it was getting close to the 1000th year. The 3 estimated that if nothing was done to stop the war once and for all, then the war would spill out into the rest of Elemental. The 3 hadn't been able to do anything for the suffering people in the other 6 countries. They weren't Naruto, they didn't have the resources to do anything other than report their findings to him. After completing their missions, the 3 returned to the fortress city to prepare for Naruto's planned war, the end to end the nearly 1000-year war. Yahiko, just like Tamatsu, stayed for a week. During the week after Yahiko left, Naruto started to make plans to finally leave Tetsu for the next of the 9 lands, Sakura no Kuni. He'd be visiting Tsukiko's country, and seeing how he could help there. When he wasn't coming up with his plan, he spent some time with the only child that actually was allowed to stay in the base, Yoshiko. The little girl had grown on him just like her mother. When he wasn't playing with the little girl of teaching her stuff with the help of the advisors, he spent his time with Tsukiko. She told him about her country, some reasons as to why the country had entered into the war all those hundreds of years ago, as well the basic geography of the place. Through his talks and walks with her around the base, Naruto had learned that out of all the countries, Sakura was the greenest one of them all. It really prided itself for having all those Sakura trees that gave the country its name. One of the reasons, aside from the greed and pride reasons, for going to war with the other countries was that the daimyo and his ancestors wanted to purge the world of ugliness. Sure, they had their own POWs to tea, and slaves to mistreat, but their reasoning for war was that the other countries were ugly, that the other countries were not beautiful enough to be allowed to taint the perfectness of the world. But of all the things that made the country stand out from the rest was the importance the nobility gave to women. They took the treatment of women as objects to a whole new level. Women were supposed to be beautiful, the country actually had standards for beauty. If a family had a daughter, that daughter at a certain age would have to reach the standard, else her entire family was penalized. The punishment for ugliness was obviously death. All the women in the country were supposed to be perfect. Of course, there were some that had escaped death by hiding, or something like that. Some families actually sold the daughters into slavery, since there was a greater chance that they would live as compared to not reaching the standards set up by the government. As to being objects, the standards stated that only certain families or people were allowed to keep such beauty in their homes. The most beautiful of women and girls were given to the nobles, as well as some of the soldiers. One of the things promised to soldiers was a really warm bed once in a while. Military prowess was rewarded by being given the chance to test their prowess in bed. There were a bunch of other things in the country that were really different from the other countries. The standard of beauty sometimes even applied to some men, or rather boys. Being a Bishonen was a bad thing for your family. In Sakura, being such was immoral. Men were masculine creatures, not pretty boys. The parents of one of these pretty boys were killed outright. The father was given a slow and painful death, while the mother, for the crime of producing such a beautiful boy, was torn limb from limb. Naruto didn't really get to come up with a real plan on how to get to Sakura no Kuni's capital or how to integrate himself into that society. Due to Tsukiko and Yoshiko, Naruto decided to stay for a week longer. At the end of the week, he greatly regretted staying longer. But he really had to leave, so he just left the 2 girls a note in the care of one of the advisors instead of personally telling them that he was leaving. He decided to walk or run to Sakura no Kuni. On the way he figured that he would pose as an artist, since art was considered as beautiful, then he creates some stuff along the way. It took Naruto 1 whole month and 2 weeks to get to Sakura no Kuni's capital city. The country really was beautiful, it was somehow able to avoid getting polluted by bloodshed. It took Naruto that long to get to the country since he had to go about creating his works of art. He had managed to carry a wagon along the way to carry his art pieces, ones that he would give to the daimyo as gifts, well more like a bribe to allow him to stay in the capital. Foreigners were not permitted to stay in the capital, one of the reasons being that the country was at war with the closest 8 nations. While traveling through the country he passed to smaller cities. At some of these he managed to find some individuals to talk with about art. In one city he went so far as to say that art was a bang, it was fleeting. The person he was talking to at that time begged to disagree, art was meant to be forever, it was eternal. Naruto was able to give a demonstration as to how an explosion could be viewed as beautiful. The other artist showed Naruto a form of art that could be considered as eternal. A story could ace the test of time if it was good enough. A story was passed down to each generation. To enhance a story, the way it was told was always different. His way was by telling the story through puppet shows. His marionettes being very well crafted, and the puppets that were supposed to depict the female gender looked like they even met the standards. After the demonstrations, they each promised one another that they would meet up again sometime to once again share art with one another. Although their views differed, they became friends. The other artist's name was surprisingly Hyakume Sunio. He was somehow distantly related to Hyakume, how Naruto had no idea, and it was not likely that he would ever find out. Instead of parting ways, Sunio had decided to travel with Naruto to another city that was hosting an art convention of sorts. It was more like an auction. As the two artists traveled together, Sunio learned that Naruto's view on art wasn't only that it was fleeting, that was merely one of his views. Naruto's actual view on art was that it was balanced, art was neutral in a sense. For beauty to exist there must be ugliness. Sunio saw the logic in Naruto's view on art. Once the two reached the city where the convention was being held, they were directed to the warehouse district of the city, that was where the convention was being held. Apparently someone had been able to make the warehouse not look like a warehouse, but a work of art. Naruto was greatly tempted to spam scholar clones to figure out how it was done. Naruto and Sunio then set up a booth that they shared. For the first 3 days Sunio showed the pieces that he was planning on auctioning off, then the next 3 days it was Naruto's turn. On the 7th day, their pieces were auctioned off to the highest bidder. Who it was the two didn't know, nor did they really care. After the convention, the two finally parted ways, Naruto heading for the capital, while Sunio claimed that he had some other business to attend to in another part of the country. Once in the capital, Naruto was able to easily get an audience with the daimyo. The man was well built, more than well built even, he was like the Hulk, but not as bulky. He also didn't get stronger the madder he got, which was a shame. Naruto showed the daimyo his creations, which the daimyo liked, then before he was to leave the presence of the daimyo announced that they were gifts. When asked why Naruto was giving them to him as gifts, Naruto told the daimyo that he was an artist from a far-off land that had heard of his love for the finer things in life, and wanted to bask in the beauty of the capital city. Due to the gifts and some more flattery, Naruto was allowed to stay, and was even granted a plot of land to build a home, as well as some more compensation for his long and arduous journey. Naruto immediately went to work on his new home, which would also serve as his temporary base of operations until he could find a place to build or set up the actual base. He had to do everything the normal way, he had to hire workers, which took quite some time. Even carpenters and the like were treated as artists. Even though Naruto had wanted the workers to build him a small house, they filled in slightly more than half of the lot with a magnificent house. Apparently there was a standard for the size of a house in the city. It took the workers a month to complete the house. In that time Naruto was able to create more works of art that he sold to art lovers in the city. Some of the works he gave to the officials of the city, and others to the military officers. Through his encounters with these people, he was able to gather some information about what happened during battles and raids. He learned from the bits and pieces of information that slipped out by accident that was in his art. In life there was balance. When it came to the balance that existed in life, Naruto was already aware of that, but the balance that he learned of was the one in the lives of the citizens of Sakura no Kuni. On the outside they openly showed their love of beauty, but there were some that hinted at another side to beauty, an unseen side, one that even the daimyo himself enjoyed and participated in. When it was nighttime, Naruto would go around the city snooping around for clues as to where prisoners and slaves were kept, if there even were those kinds of people. It really was possible that there were no prisoners and that everyone that the Sakura army met on the battlefield was killed. Every person that didn't meet their standards was instantly put to death. But Naruto wanted to make sure. He also wanted to investigate the things he had learned from his brief encounters with the upper crust of Sakura society. It was 1 week after his house was finished that he accidentally stumbled upon the balance to the city's beauty. He had fallen into the sewers when he wasn't paying attention. While in it he heard echoes of screaming and shouting. Those weren't sounds that would normally be heard in the city, so Naruto waded through the gunk until he reached a grate that led to a ventilation shaft. Since the screaming and shouting was being carried out to the sewer by the shaft, Naruto decided that he would follow the sounds by crawling. He crawled until he found what he was looking for. It was a grate that showed him the inside of a room. Inside the room were some people that he had met during the month of his house's construction. These people were performing perverse acts of violence on restrained individuals. Some of the individuals looked worse than ragdolls. After seeing that, Naruto moved onwards, wanting to see what else Sakura was hiding while at the same time not wanting to know any more. What he found out sickened, horrified, and shocked him. On the outside, the people of Sakura no Kuni, especially the elite, were extremists when it came to beauty, hidden beneath the surface. Literally, they were extremists when it came to the balance of such beauty. They were monstrous. They were just as sick, or in some cases worse, than the people of Tetsu. At least in Tetsu they showed the true colors out in the open, but here in Sakura everything was hidden beneath the skin. The ones that got treated the worst were the women. There was a lot of things that were done to the women. These things ranged from a simple beating to well tearing them limb from limb. Some of the women were eaten alive in all senses of the word eaten. If Naruto were into sadism and masochism, this place would be heaven. It's a good thing that he wasn't into that kind of thing. Naruto had even managed to find the daimyo himself participating in these acts of perverse cruelty. He was actually the cruelest of them all. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.